I'm Julie Barkey with this Senate update. To address rail safety concerns, the governor proposed a combination of bonding and assessing railroad companies to pay for safety measures and upgrades to some rail crossings. His plan consists of 75 rail safety improvements affecting most areas of the state, and Governor Dayton laid out his plan in a news conference on Friday.
My bills this time, and I appreciate the support of the legislators who are here and others who can't be here, but is going to focus on some projects major projects that require grade separations that are so significant that we're going to put I'm going to propose putting a part of my bonding bill into those projects, particularly in Moorhead. Mayor Moorhead is here, and Wilmer. Mayor is here, Prairie Island, and Coon Rapids. Also, I'm proposing to assess the railroad companies, the four major companies, an annual assessment of $33 million based on their track mileage across the state to fund additional at-grade improvements. There's about $240 million of additional, these would be at-grade, not separating the grade, but at-grade improvements on railroad crossings. We've proposing an assessment of the four rail companies of $33 million a year, so over it would go into a special fund to be used solely for rail improvements, and that fund over the course of the next few years would be sufficient to make a big difference in the lives of a lot of Minnesotans. Also recommending modernizing the railroad property taxes to make them more consistent with how property tax is applied in other kinds of property and uses. It would generate about $21 million a year for the state, which again would go into this railroad improvement fund, and $45 million a year for local governments to help them with their additional costs from this additional traffic. And then finally, we'll be putting more emphasis on the training and the other outreach efforts that are already underway, which again we can elaborate on shortly.
We really got a good handle and a good roadmap on what we need to do to improve the congestion issues and the safety issues that confront our communities every day. In the last 5 weeks, we've had 5 major derailments, some of those quite spectacular with explosions and the like, and a lot of pollution entering into our environment. The US DOT anticipates 10 major oil train derailments per year. We're definitely on track to meet that projection. We have a challenge in our own western suburbs with a new rail line, or a new connection rail line, introducing these kinds of congestion, emergency, and dangerous issues in communities that haven't experienced them before.
With all the oil trains coming through our communities now, there's a new age in railroad transportation and safety, and our local communities have a much smaller margin of error now because it just takes one 30,000-gallon oil tanker to derail and explode, and you have a catastrophe. And so what we are doing with the governor's leadership is making sure that we get to 0 accidents on our crossings and our intersections, things that we can control as a state, and to also make sure that our public safety officials are well prepared, that emergency plans, evacuation plans are top notch. And so one of the things we do is increase the property tax on railroads. I think it's important, and I think it's right that our local residents in our communities who see these dangerous oil trains go by their homes and their schools every day should not have to pay for the railroad companies to improve the safety of their operations.
As a fire chief and a resident of Coon Rapids, I can tell you firsthand the issue that increased rail traffic and the practice of staging trains has had on us as a community, both as it relates to emergency response times and the livability for the residents of our city. The practice of staging trains is a train waiting to get into the yard, and we've met with the railroad and suggested this should be done in unpopulated areas and not have an effect on communities such as Coon Rapids, where we have 62,000 people. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any improvement in any way, shape, or form. When a train is staged, it slows down as it comes into our city. Therefore, it blocks the first crossing it hits. It'll block for 6 to 8 minutes on a good day. Some days it doesn't go far enough, and the crossing will be blocked up to 30 minutes before it finally gets cleared. And then, of course, when the train starts up again, it's starting up very slowly, and therefore the same issue is at the next crossing, again, 6 to 8 minute delay. And again, many times we're at the 30-minute issue. And as you all know, in an emergency, whether it's a law enforcement, a fire, or medical emergency, seconds count. We shoot for a 4-minute response time in our city to serve our residents. And unfortunately, they deserve better. It's not happening on a daily basis because of these crossings being blocked. On the livability issue, we actually hear from our residents that they know that the chances are very good they're going to get stopped by a train, so they'll actually take paperwork with them or whether they have their smartphone because they expect they're going to get stopped at a crossing, and they could just put the car in park and start taking care of whatever business they can, as long as they're going to be there for a while.
Rail safety and a safe, accessible evacuation route are constant concerns. The community's concerns were nearly realized last October when a Canadian Pacific train derailed near Prairie Island, blocking Sturgeon Lake Road and causing a substantial grass fire. Our department's brush fire truck was the first responding unit to that incident and fortunately was able to control and extinguish the fire by the time the Red Wing Fire Department arrived. Thankfully, the train car that was damaged and derailed wasn't carrying highly flammable crude oil, but those dangerous loads pass through Prairie Island every day, and train cars carrying crude oil were known to be further down the track that day.
In my former role as fire chief with the city of Willmar, I can tell you that railroad crossing does impact public safety and the response times. We have basically at-grade crossings on the east and the west side of town, and then we have a bridge that goes over right in the downtown area. We would, when a call would come in, we would contact the railroad to see if the railroad was blocked. If the crossing was blocked, then we would reroute our vehicles over what we call the First Street Bridge. And that delayed our response times into those areas. And as Chief Piper stated, statistically, fire doubles in size every minute. And so you can do your own calculations to realize that a 2 or 3 minute extended response time does have catastrophic effects.
Does the public talk to you about this? I know it's a concern of yours. So the Moorhead public talking to you about it?
They talk about safety, but as you know, mostly they're mostly annoyed. I mean, the discussion about that we sit there and check our emails and stuff like that. That's everybody. We all know that. We all route our ways in some way, how we can get over the tracks before a train comes. That's a norm, but I don't think the general public thinks about the safety aspect as keenly.
Governor, have you talked to the railroads about the $33 million annual assessment, and what kind of reaction are you getting in terms of support or opposition to that?
Well, I've heard indirectly that they're not pleased. No one likes paying more taxes, but this is an enormous expense. Hundreds of millions of dollars is being forced on the state of Minnesota, the state government, on local governments, on businesses, on citizens. And for the railroads to resist paying even a minimal part of that additional cost, to me, is just unacceptable.
Particularly understand that relieving congestion in one area, if it causes congestion in another area, that is no solution to any problem. And that is what my constituents, Lynn Carlson's constituents, Alice Johnson's constituents, Mike Freiberg's constituents, really want to see addressed in the legislation that we're bringing forward. Thank you.